Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, give a like, and don't forget to leave a comment. Enjoy watching.
The office always smelled like burnt coffee and cheap ambition, but that morning, something was different, something quieter, tighter in the air, like the walls were leaning in and trying to hear what was about to go down. I was sitting in the smallest conference room on the 24th floor, the one they call the aquarium, because of the floor-to-ceiling glass walls that offer no privacy and absolutely no dignity. Across from me sat Andrew Collins, Vice President of Sales and Professional Ego in slacks, with his shirt collar unbuttoned just enough to make you think he was casual, even though his every move screamed pre-rehearsed performance. He opened with the classic line, the one I swear they teach at every corporate charm school, Mark. This isn't easy. I wanted to laugh right then and there, but I held it in. He shuffled some papers, like that meant anything, then folded his hands in front of him like he was praying to the altar of HR compliance. It's nothing personal, he said, like that made it better. Like stripping 12 years of loyalty, overnight fixes, lost weekends, and 2 near heart attacks from a guy who basically ran point on every client fire they set wasn't personal. Then came the coup de grace. We're restructuring the department and, unfortunately, your role is being eliminated as part of that transition. Now, let me rewind for a second. Just 5 days before this heartwarming betrayal, Andrew had been sweating through his undershirt on a call with a client so furious I thought they were going to climb through the screen and choke him out live on Zoom. A major account, I'm talking 7 figures, flagship partnership, board report material, had nearly walked away because of a botched proposal, a late deliverable, and a systems crash that could have been avoided if someone hadn't tried to cut corners with the infrastructure I'd been warning about for months. Andrew was flailing, fumbling through buzzwords and fake sincerity, and the client wasn't having it. That's when I stepped in. I stayed late again. I worked through the night again. I patched the integration manually, rewrote the deliverable in a format the client actually used, and joined the next day's call like a ghostbuster dragging a proton pack, calm, competent, and just tired enough to not give a damn about who got credit. The client stayed. Andrew kept his job. And today, I was being thanked for that little miracle with a pink slip disguised as a package. So when he finished his rehearsed monologue, I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I looked right at him, straight past the fake sympathy and the slight smirk at the corner of his mouth that said he thought he'd just pulled a clean kill, and I laughed. Quiet, short, not the laugh of a man losing everything, but the kind that makes people nervous. Then I leaned in and said, "We'll see." That was it. No threats. No shouting. Just those 3 words and a look I'd been saving for years. He blinked, a little confused, like he thought I didn't understand what was happening. But I understood perfectly. I stood up, straightened my jacket, shook his hand, because I wanted him to feel in control for exactly 5 more seconds, and walked out. The moment the glass door clicked shut behind me, I felt a strange kind of peace. Not because I was okay, believe me, I wasn't. I was angry, humiliated, and tired in a way I didn't even know how to name. But because I finally saw Andrew clearly for what he was, a guy who would ride your work like a surfboard and then push you under as soon as the tide shifted. He didn't just want me gone. He wanted me forgotten. What he didn't know, what he didn't even think to consider, was that the client I'd saved, the one he lied to and misled and then dumped me after appeasing, had reached out. Not to him. To me. 2 days after the incident, I got an email from one of their execs. It was short. Would love to catch up. Got a few questions. That was it. But I could read between the lines. They'd seen through him, and they remembered who actually fixed things. So 5 days after Andrew cut me loose, 5 days after his smug little power move, I joined a scheduled Zoom call between their leadership and ours. He logged on with his usual tight-lipped smile, ready to sell some new strategic initiative he barely understood. And then he froze. Because there, in the top corner, sitting next to their senior VP of operations, was me. Logged in. Camera on. Wearing the same jacket he'd watched me leave in. He stuttered, just a little, just enough to notice, and the VP from the client's side smiled politely and said, "Andrew, we asked Mark to join us today. We had a few concerns about how the last issue was handled, and since Mark's the one who actually fixed it, we figured he'd be able to walk us through it." I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just nodded once, clicked share screen, and pulled up the audit trail. The one with the timestamps, the proof of how the mistake happened, who had approved it, and who had to clean it up. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. I just walked them through the truth. Because sometimes the truth is the loudest revenge there is. Be honest. Have you ever dreamed of getting revenge on a boss who used you and then tossed you aside like garbage? I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to swing a hammer. I just needed to show up. And I did, with the receipts. And now, Andrew was realizing something I had known for a long time. When you stab the guy holding the parachute, you'd better hope the landing is soft. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. It's amazing what you start to remember once someone pulls the rug out from under you. Not the big, obvious stuff like promotions or handshakes at holiday parties, but the quiet, invisible sacrifices that stacked up year after year until they became part of your DNA. I gave that company 12 years of my life, and not the lazy kind of 12 years where you punch in, punch out, and coast under the radar. I mean the type of years that chew you up and reshape who you are. Where work follows you home like an unpaid roommate and your phone doesn't stop buzzing even when you're supposed to be on vacation. I was the guy they called at 2 in the morning when the client portal crashed and someone forgot the password to the server room, and I always picked up. Every single time. I remember debugging a full-stack crash on our inventory system while my wife sat alone at a restaurant, waiting for me on our anniversary. I remember dragging a sleeping bag into the server closet during our last big rollout because I didn't want to risk missing the 4 a.m. deployment window. I remember doing coffee runs for engineers who were 10 years younger than me because they were too deep in sprint mode to leave their keyboards. I was the fixer, the translator, the human bandage for every project that got cut open by poor planning and wishful thinking. And the worst part? I never once asked for credit. I just wanted to be respected. That's all. Back in the early days, before the brand revamp, in the fancy kitchen with 3 types of oat milk, things felt like a real team. We were scrappy, sloppy, and underfunded, but we had grit. Everyone pitched in, and no one cared if your degree was from MIT or a community college in Indiana. If you could solve a problem, you were in. I earned my stripes in those years. I sat shoulder to shoulder with founders, stayed late with sales, and helped write our first security protocols in a Google Doc titled, Stuff We Shouldn't Screw Up. But time has a funny way of rewriting the rules. Somewhere around year 7, the tide started turning. We got bought out, restructured, buzzworded into oblivion. Suddenly it wasn't enough to be competent. You had to be visionary, scalable, synergistic. I wasn't any of those things. I was reliable. I was solid. I was the one who knew where the bodies were buried because I'd helped dig the damn holes when no one else would grab a shovel. That's when the new blood started showing up. Guys with tighter suits and looser ethics. Girls who took more selfies than notes during meetings. People who talked a lot about culture but never stayed past 5. I wasn't bitter, not at first. I figured every company goes through this phase. You get flashy, you get sloppy, you course correct. But we never corrected. We just kept coasting on people like me while pretending it was all innovation and leadership from the top. I remember the exact moment I realized I was being phased out. It was a Tuesday, they always come on Tuesdays, and I opened my calendar to see that a strategic planning meeting I usually led had been reassigned to someone named Tyler, who had joined the company 3 months ago and still referred to our flagship platform as that one app thing. No explanation. No email. Just a meeting moved into clear message. We've got it from here. Old man. It didn't stop there. Andrew, who used to rely on me like a crutch when things went sideways, started making decisions without looping me in. Then he started presenting my ideas as his own. Then he started inviting me to fewer and fewer meetings. I tried to tell myself it wasn't personal, just growing pains, organizational change, the inevitable shift of roles. But deep down, I knew better. I just didn't want to admit it because if I did, I'd have to face the truth that all those sacrifices I made didn't build me security, they just built someone else's stepping stone. You know what I got when I left? Nothing. No send-off, no bagel breakfast, not even a sad little email from HR with a stock photo of fireworks and the words, "Thank you for your contributions." I cleaned out my desk in silence while a 24-year-old walked by bragging about his Q1 impact and bragging to a coworker that he finally figured out how to VPN in. I took my coffee mug, my backup charger, and the last bit of my dignity and walked out without a soul saying goodbye. 12 years of fixing broken code, salvaging botched launches, mentoring managers who were now 2 rungs above me, all erased in one restructuring call that lasted less than 20 minutes. And the worst part? The look on Andrew's face. That casual, rehearsed expression he wore like a mask made of LinkedIn advice columns. Like he'd been waiting for the chance to drop me the second I outlived my usefulness. I realized then that it wasn't that I didn't see this coming. It's that I didn't want to believe someone I'd protected, covered for, and literally saved from getting canned just days earlier would actually do it. But they always do it. That's the unspoken rule of corporate life. Loyalty isn't rewarded, it's recorded, until someone new comes in and hits delete. So yeah, no bagel, no handshake. Just a quiet walk to the elevator and the slow realization that the company I bled for wasn't mine anymore. Maybe never was. But as I waited in the lobby, watching Tyler fumble through a phone call with the client I'd once rescued, I realized something else too. I may have walked out empty-handed, but I didn't walk out powerless. They thought they cut me off. What they didn't realize was that I had something better than access. I had memory. I had receipts. And I had options. There's something uniquely gut-wrenching about realizing that the very thing you stayed up nights fixing, the thing you threw your back out holding together while everyone else was already halfway to the weekend, was casually repackaged, gift-wrapped, and sold upstairs by someone who didn't lift a damn finger to help when it was on fire. I found out on a Thursday, from someone I trusted, someone still inside the building who'd been watching the show unfold from the back row. They didn't send a dramatic message or blow a whistle. Just a quiet phone call, a long sigh, and a sentence that hit like a sucker punch. Andrew told the board he saved the client account. At first, I thought I misheard. I even said, "Wait, what?" Like a sitcom character who can't believe the punchline. But no, they repeated it, slower this time, and with more detail. Apparently, after I patched the system crash and rewrote the deliverables and smoothed the relationship with the client, Andrew strutted into the quarterly exec briefing and told them it was all part of his contingency strategy, said he pulled resources together at the 11th hour and steered the team back on course. I could almost hear his smug voice in my head, pacing in front of a whiteboard while pointing at one of my slides, nodding thoughtfully like he was the captain of a ship he didn't know how to drive. And the best part? They bought it. Hook, line, and ego-stroking sinker. They gave him a performance bonus. A bonus for not doing his job, failing to manage the project, nearly losing our biggest account, and then taking credit for the guy he fired 5 days later. That's when something changed in me. Up until that moment, I'd been angry, sure, hurt, humiliated, all the usual flavors of corporate betrayal. But hearing how he spun my work into his promotion, flipped a switch. I stopped sulking and started sharpening. Because if he thought I was going to crawl away quietly after that, he hadn't learned a damn thing about me in 12 years. The universe, in its occasionally twisted sense of humor, sent me an invitation later that same day. Not literally, of course, but in the form of an email with a subject line so simple it made me pause. Coffee. It was from Denise, an exec over at the client company, one of the sharpest, most no-nonsense people I'd ever worked with. We'd gotten along well during the crisis, respected each other's time, didn't play games. Her email just said, "Would love to catch up. Your name came up in a conversation here, and I had some thoughts." Now, you've got to understand, this wasn't just small talk. Clients don't catch up for fun, especially not ones who nearly pulled out of a contract a month ago. Something was up. And if she was reaching out to me after I'd been fired and supposedly replaced, then that meant Andrew had messed something up, or worse, gotten caught in one of his own lies. We met at a coffee shop just off downtown, neutral territory, the kind of place where executives wear jeans to feel relatable and every pastry costs $6. She didn't waste time. After a few sips of whatever non-dairy latte she'd ordered, she leaned in and said, "So, tell me, who really ran point on the fix?" I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. I just raised an eyebrow and let her keep going. Because Andrew's version doesn't quite line up with the documents I reviewed. There it was. Confirmation. She'd seen the holes in his story, the mismatched timelines, the vague language in the report that somehow never attached names to the solutions. And more importantly, she still had questions. Questions I had answers to. She wasn't asking me to spill secrets or break NDAs, not yet, but she was giving me something I hadn't had in a while, leverage. I told her the truth, carefully, factually, no spin, just data and sequence. I explained what happened when the system crashed, what the root cause was, how I fixed it, and the steps I took to keep their side of the platform from going dark. I showed her timestamps, forwarded her the Slack messages. I didn't editorialize. I didn't even mention the firing. But when I was done, she leaned back and exhaled through her nose, the professional version of swearing out loud. "Figures," she said, shaking her head. "We had our doubts. He couldn't answer a single technical question last week. Turns out, they'd had another hiccup. Minor, but enough to make them dig a little. Enough to make them question whether the man now taking bows had any clue how to keep the lights on. Denise didn't say it outright, but I could tell they were preparing for something, a review, an audit, maybe just a shifting of trust. And in that moment, I knew I had a role to play, even if it wasn't official. Let me be clear. I didn't leak anything. I didn't break policy or go nuclear. I just told the story. The real one. And the people listening? They happened to have a long memory, deep pockets, and very little patience for being lied to. I left that meeting without a job offer, without any promises. But I walked out with something even better, momentum. Because when you've got truth on your side and the receipts to back it up, all you have to do is wait. Wait for the cracks to widen. Wait for the calls to start. Wait for the guy who stepped on you to realize that some bridges don't burn, they smolder. And when the smoke starts rising, people look for the one who warned them first. This time, that someone was going to be me. There's a funny thing about corporate power. It shifts fast and silently, like a tide you don't notice until your shoes are soaked and it's too late to move. Andrew had spent years thinking he was the current, that he controlled which direction the water flowed. But what he never realized is that the real current was on the client's side, the people writing the checks. The people who weren't impressed by buzzwords or PowerPoint slides, but by results, stability, and someone who actually answered emails with solutions instead of slogans. And now that client, the one Andrew thought he'd pacified with smoke and mirrors, was starting to ask real questions, and I was standing right beside them when they did. It started with a single Zoom meeting, one Andrew thought was a routine check-in with the client's ops team, just a chance to pitch a new initiative and remind them how vital he and his team were to their future roadmap. He logged on early, probably thinking he'd use the time to butter up the stakeholders, maybe toss in a few flattering stats lifted from someone else's spreadsheet. But what he didn't expect was to see me sitting there, camera on, professionally dressed, just another face in the Brady Bunch grid, right next to Denise, their executive sponsor, who greeted me with the kind of familiarity you can't fake. The moment Andrew saw me, I watched something flicker behind his eyes. Not panic, not yet. He was still playing it cool, but surprise. That split second where his brain tried to recalibrate what the hell I was doing on a call he thought he owned. He gave me a thin smile and said, "Well, this is unexpected," which was his way of trying to act like nothing was out of place. I returned the smile, just as thin, and said, "I was invited." Now, if you've never watched someone unravel in real time, let me tell you, it doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. Their sentences get shorter. Their eyes dart to the corners of the screen. They talk a little faster, like momentum might save them. Andrew started with his usual pitch, talking about value alignment and operational synergy, trying to steer the meeting back into his comfort zone. But Denise wasn't having it. She cut him off politely but firmly and said, "We'd like to revisit some of the reporting from last quarter, specifically around the recovery work." And just like that, the ground shifted. They didn't ask me to speak. Not yet. They let him twist. Andrew fumbled through his version, glossing over timelines, using vague language like "we" and "our team," but you could feel it. The energy on the call wasn't buying what he was selling. Denise let him finish, gave him a moment to breathe, and then said, "Mark, would you mind walking us through what actually happened during that incident? I think some clarity would be helpful here." That was it. The turn. I didn't gloat. I didn't roll out a speech. I just opened my screen share and pulled up the recovery timeline I drafted weeks earlier, the one with the emails, the fixed logs, and the list of people actually involved in the solution. I walked through it slowly, methodically, like I was explaining a simple recipe. Andrew tried to interrupt once, said something about team effort, but Denise shut him down with a single raised hand and a cold, "Let him finish." When I was done, there was silence. Not awkward, just heavy. Then Denise spoke. "That confirms what we suspected," she said. "Thank you, Mark. We've been reviewing this internally, and frankly, we're concerned. There's a pattern of miscommunication here, and we need to reevaluate how we engage moving forward." Andrew didn't say much after that. He nodded, offered some nonsense about committing to transparency, and left the meeting with his camera off. I knew what that meant. Someone was in damage control mode. What he didn't know was that the damage had already been done. The client wasn't just mad. They felt lied to. And that's the kind of anger you can't charm your way out of. Over the next week, things moved quickly. I wasn't in the company anymore, but people talked. They always talk. Word started spreading that Andrew's bonus was being reassessed. An internal compliance officer had been looped into conversations. There were whispers about project audits and leadership reviews. I kept my distance, but Denise kept me in the loop, not because she needed me, but because she trusted me. That alone was worth more than any severance package Andrew had tried to hide behind. I didn't return to the company. I didn't ask for my job back. That ship had sailed. But what I did do was sign a consulting contract with the client. Quietly. Cleanly. Just a few hours a week at first, helping them build oversight protocols and vendor accountability models, the same kind of work I'd been doing, unpaid and unrecognized, for Andrew's team for years. The irony wasn't lost on me. Andrew had fired me to look like a hero, and now I was being paid by the client he lied to, helping them dig through the mess he'd made trying to replace me. And every document I reviewed, every inconsistency I flagged, was another nail in a coffin he built himself. Because here's the thing people like Andrew never understand. You don't burn bridges when the client owns the bridge. You don't fake your way through deliverables when the person you stole credit from is still holding the receipts. And you don't fire the guy who kept your world from collapsing, not unless you're absolutely sure he doesn't have another place to stand. Turns out, I did. And I was just getting started. You'd think a guy like Andrew would have seen it coming, the slow unraveling, the loss of trust, the quiet, suffocating realization that the walls were caving in not because someone set fire to them, but because he knocked out the supports himself and called it renovation. But no, he kept showing up in his tailored suits and polished shoes, still smiling in hallways and cracking hollow jokes in meetings like the ship wasn't sinking right under his expensive leather loafers. And I just watched. From a distance. With a front row seat that didn't cost me a thing. It started subtle, like most downfalls do. A canceled project here, a delayed payment there. But when a client pulls back, it's never just one thing, it's a signal. Other clients notice. Internal chatter starts. Managers hold whispered meetings behind glass walls, and no one wants to sit next to you at the quarterly strategy session. The guy who once swaggered into conference calls suddenly gets rescheduled more often than he gets invited. And Andrew? He played it cool, kept pushing the same old charm, completely unaware that the fuse had been lit weeks ago, the day I sat next to Denise and told the truth. You see, I didn't need to do much after that call. I didn't need revenge in the cinematic sense, no public takedown, no dramatic reveal, no confetti cannons and mic drops. All I had to do was let the truth circulate. The client did the rest. They froze spending on Andrew's department, asked for quarterly audits, required his team to send detailed reports on anything that moved, which, for a guy like him, was poison. Andrew wasn't built for scrutiny. He thrived in chaos, in smoke and mirrors, where he could take credit for good luck and shift blame for bad outcomes. But when the microscope came out, there was nowhere left to hide. And here's the part I'll admit gave me more satisfaction than it probably should have. I wasn't even the one who reported him. That pleasure went to someone inside. A junior PM I once mentored, someone who'd seen me stay late, fix broken budgets, and coach panicking analysts through tight deadlines. He sent me a message one night, just as simple. I filed an internal ethics complaint. I didn't ask why. I knew why. Because people like Andrew don't just burn one bridge, they light a whole forest and hope no one sees the smoke. The fallout wasn't sudden. It never is. Companies don't like drama unless they're pitching it to investors. No, Andrew was temporarily reassigned first, then placed on strategic leave. Finally, a vague, bloodless memo went out saying he had decided to pursue new opportunities. No farewell party. No LinkedIn parade. Just a fast disappearance and a redacted bullet point in the org chart. And I swear, the silence that followed was louder than any announcement they could have made. And me? I kept working. Quietly. I kept my contract with the client, expanded it slowly, and eventually started helping them choose new vendors that didn't include my former employer. I never once mentioned Andrew's name in those meetings. I didn't have to. His reputation did that on its own. I showed up. I delivered. I became the safe choice. The reliable choice. Funny how that works. The same things they said made me old school at my last job suddenly made me essential in the one that followed. Some nights I still think about it, though. Not with regret. More like curiosity. Wondering how long Andrew thought he could ride on other people's work before gravity kicked in. Wondering if he ever figured out it wasn't one mistake that brought him down, but a dozen little ones. Every ignored warning, every misused report, every time he smiled at someone who was holding him up and thought, I could do this without you. Because the truth is, I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't write angry blog posts or leak confidential files or make dramatic phone calls to the board. I just told the story when someone asked. I just showed the receipts when the moment came. I just kept my head down and let the system run the way it was designed, where credit has to match contribution, where lies don't survive the audit trail, and where you can't fake competence when the lights go out. There's something deeply satisfying about justice that doesn't need applause. I didn't get a standing ovation. I didn't get my old job back. I didn't even get a thank you from most of the people who watched it all unfold. But I did get something else, something better. I got to walk away clean, with my reputation intact, with my head high, with the knowledge that when it really counted, I stood up for the truth, and the truth stood up for me. Andrew sent me one message. Just one. I didn't open it. I still haven't. It's sitting there in my inbox unread. I don't need to see what it says. Whatever apology or excuse or half-assed explanation he tried to offer, it doesn't matter. Because I didn't destroy him. He did that all by himself. All I did was light the fuse.